Well, tell me, mama, what's going on? Tell me, darling, what's going on? I'm going back.
Welcome back, everybody. Bacon and Egg Show, episode lucky number 13,
Hey.
July 10th, 2020. Hope everybody had a good Independence Day week, 2 weeks, whatever the hell it's been now. We got a guest with us this week. Jay, you want to tell us a little bit about who we got?
Yeah, man. So we're looking for some guests. I was thinking of some people we could bring in that have some ties to at least to some within the state, sports within the state. And my friend Jack came to mind. Jack went to Texas Tech, covered sports at Texas Tech. May have seen his work on Raidersports.com with the Daily Toreador up there in Lubbock. He's also done some stuff on ESPNU, Sirius XM channel, made some appearances there. And today, he's on the Bacon and Egg Show. So everybody want to welcome Jack Densmore. Jack, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Thanks for coming on, dude. We appreciate it.
Man.
Looking forward to this conversation. And I tell you, you came to mind really because of Patrick Mahomes being in the news recently, signing his, if he's paid out through the whole contract, would end up being $503 million.
Just a dash over $500 million, just
yeah,
a touch.
You know, just skosh.
Not
So,
bad money, not bad
yeah,
work if you can get it.
So, Jack, first I wanted to ask you, you spent some time around Mahomes. Did you think that he was destined to be this type of a quarterback in the league and have this big of an impact? Like, how did you feel? What was it like being around Mahomes?
Well, it was funny because I was there for his last year at Texas Tech. And towards the end of, after the football season, when the NFL draft was kind of coming around, I wrote a column on the Daily Toreador about where I thought he was going to get drafted at. And I actually had him going to the Bears. And so I was surprised when the Bears didn't pick him or Deshaun Watson. They went with Mitchell Trubisky, and I was very, very surprised about that. And it was funny because I also wrote a column on Raider Sports saying, after when it was his time to start, Alex Smith was gone and it was his time to shine. I was like, because everybody was hyping him up, and I was like, well, maybe we should relax a little bit. Let's see how it goes. And I really ate crow on that because he won NFL MVP. So I was like, okay, well, nobody listened to me.
Well, you were right about the Bears thing. Like, I think everybody was sort of surprised that the Bears went that route. And as a Texans fan, I was very pleased. But no, I think you're right, man. That was one of those things where all the quarterbacks that had come out of Texas Tech up to that point, while maybe they were deemed system quarterbacks, but now it turns out that they were ahead of their time, really. And the league just wasn't ready for that type of a skill set. And then as the league evolves and changes, and then a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, who has all the tools anyway, and he also happens to have played in an offense that the NFL is evolving into. So fascinating timing for him, and the payday turned out all right, huh?
Yeah, and there's no one more deserving of that payday than Mahomes. He's just such a humble guy, and he does so much for the Kansas City community. And I didn't really get to talk to him much because I was just a freshman reporter. Barely had the confidence to show up. So, but there was a couple of times where I talked to him, and he was just such a humble guy. So there's no one more deserving, really.
Yeah, that whole draft was really fascinating to me because the build up to that, you started hearing Mahomes, his name on kind of the national scene and locally and stuff like that start to creep into that first round. The Texans were kind of there in the mid first round, if I remember right, mid to late first round, and ended up trading up to get Deshaun Watson, but started hearing Mahomes being thrown around for that kind of like around 20th pick, whatever it may have been. And, we all follow Big 12 football and all that, and kind of going like, well, yeah, he seems like he's got a ton of upside, really talented guy, but like, it just seemed like the record wise at Tech, you go, are we going to go with that in a first round kind of thing? Like, is this a reach? Of course, in retrospect, it would have been the steal of the century, but like, it was just fascinating to see him start to move up, and then where he fell to Kansas City, which I think the Texans had the next pick or 2 picks later, something like that, to where it was like then Deshaun Watson falls in. But yeah, I mean, just that draft was insane. And what was it, this game last season where, what was it, KC at Chicago? I think it was a Sunday night or a Monday night game where he Mahomes kind of made the celebration or whatever about where he was drafted, and the whole Trubisky thing. And God, it's got to be miserable to be a Bears fan. But that's
Man, I'll always remember where I was for that draft. I was in San Diego. I was in a hotel in San Diego, and my buddy Christopher texted me before the draft, and he goes, "If you could have anybody in this draft for the Texans, who would you want?" And I told him Deshaun, not because I thought they were actually going to end up with him, because I didn't think there was a chance that he would fall as far as he did, but if I could pick anyone, and it was Watson, and sure enough, it ended up happening that day. And but yeah, you look back at that now. If you're that Bears GM, I mean, I'm not hiring you I wouldn't hire you to walk my dog at that point, when you got 2 of these quarterbacks that are drafted after Trubisky of this talent. But no, it's cool, man. And I was trying to do the timeline, Jack, on when you were on campus, and I knew you were there for at least that last year. So how many years were you there with Kingsbury?
I believe that would be 3 years. 3 years with
3 years.
Kingsbury.
So I got to ask, man, like, is he as good looking in person as he is on television?
I have to say, I was like, the guy's a good looking dude.
I knew it.
He's like Sean McVay. They're just good looking guys. And it doesn't help that he has like a 4.45 million mansion, in Arizona now. I don't know.
War room, that draft war room that he had. Like, how incredible was that?
What a view. What a view.
God.
And it was funny because they showed Sean McVay's, and it kind of looked similar too. And I was just like, they're basically the same person.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And true. It's funny because it's true. So being around Kingsbury, sort of, you were around some great football minds. Mahomes, I consider just a great mind. You have to have, he obviously has the talent, but the mental game is there as well. And it far surpasses nearly everybody that's in the league right now. But when you're around Kingsbury and you hear him talk about the game, and even though maybe the wins and losses might not have added up for him during his tenure there, but you can see that the knowledge of football and the ability to coach is there. Did you take away anything from your time around him, and sort of what was the biggest takeaway that you had from Kingsbury?
Well, starting out as a young reporter, one thing I took away from was that he was just a very welcoming person. So someone like me that was very timid and shy and not having the confidence to ask questions, he just seemed very welcoming. He'd always respond, even if it wasn't the greatest question ever. But in terms of his football mind, something like I thought about was when he was fired from Texas Tech and there was talks of him going to the NFL. I thought that'd be a perfect place for him to be because, in my opinion, I didn't know if he was the best recruiter, but in the NFL, you don't really have to do too much recruiting. You just kind of sign free agents, you make draft picks, and I was like, that's the perfect spot for him to be. And time will tell if I'm right about that, but I think the Cardinals, now that they have DeAndre Hopkins, that can be an offense that's as deadly as the Ravens or the Chiefs. So
that's, you beat me to the point there. I was going to ask kind of what it seems like his trajectory in the NFL, given what he did with Arizona in the first year, and now the way that they're building, like the sky's the limit for him in Arizona, and kind of what the difference would be in your mind with what kind of how things played out at Tech versus what he has going in Arizona now. But that's interesting about the recruiting thing. I mean, do you think that's more of Kliff's personality? Just kind of, he didn't really care for the recruiting game. He was more focused on the X's and O's. I find that part of it fascinating with him.
Yeah, I'd have to say first of all, he's a very offensive-minded guy. So offense was the number one thing for him. And I don't think anybody can say that Texas Tech's offense was ever bad during his time. It was mostly the struggles were on the defensive side, and that's kind of where Tech had a lot of issues, and that's how they lost a lot of games, is they couldn't keep the leads. Even when Mahomes was there making all these crazy plays, it ended up being the defense couldn't keep the other Big 12 offenses back. They couldn't keep Mayfield from scoring and stuff in that nature. So I think it was just, in my opinion, he couldn't quite recruit the defense as he could the offense. If that makes sense.
Sure. No, it makes total sense. I mean, Kerry, when you're looking at, and that's, you look at Tech and you look at their history, and even back to Mike Leach, where they always seem to, it was always, and that was sort of the bit when the Big 12 sort of became that, well, we're going to score, it's the first to 50 in the Big 12, basically, and if Texas won a national championship in a year where they gave up over 40 points multiple times, so like it's just sort of that mindset, like you said, Jack. I think the college game in terms of the offensive side of the ball, has been there and is ready for that. Maybe he just didn't, think about the defensive side of the ball as much, and that's sort of easy to see. But Kerry, when we talk about Tech and the prolificness of the offense, that's never in question, right?
No, I mean, I've always associated Tech with high scoring teams. I mean, I think back even to like the Spike Dykes days of
right.
Like Byron Hanspard and just these guys that like could score a ton of points. And then, like you mentioned, get into Leach and going on further than that, which is interesting. And we can get to this as we kind of talk about the future of the Red Raider football program with Matt Wells and kind of the direction they want to go. But like, yeah, I've always associated Tech with, whether it's the air raid and just, they're going to score a ton of points, and Lubbock is not a friendly place to go play. And that they're going to put 40 on the board in previous years, and it's like, who's going to be the last one with the ball, as we have found out heartbreakingly so over the years. But I guess this is a good opportunity to ask it. I mean, where Matt Wells is trying to kind of bring a more defensive mindset to Lubbock, right? I mean, how is that playing in terms of Red Raider alums and fans and stuff that are used to having the air raid and the high powered offenses?
Well, from what I've seen, I've really been fascinated with some of the transfers they've gotten. Eric Monroe from LSU, and this is more offensive, but Jadarius Townsend from Alabama. It's just like they're getting transfers for positions that can really just boost the team, and especially Eric Monroe. That was a transfer that I was very fascinated about because that was defensive, and I was like, that's the secondary. The secondary needs the most help with this Big 12 conference, and they, some of the other guys, returning guys, that if we have a football season, Rico Jeffers, Adrian Fry, all these guys have a lot of potential. So I think the gears are turning for a better defensive year for Texas Tech.
Now, without following it too closely, I guess, or kind of seeing it from afar, I should say, is Matt Wells one of these guys that's kind of come in and played this whole, like, we're going to change the culture, we're going to kind of reset things here and rebuild it in his own image? Or is he kind of playing off of the tradition of, going, with Dykes and Leach and these guys that have had so much success kind of over the years and kind of keeping it? I always find that part fascinating with head coaching changes, is this concept of like, we're going to change the culture and we're going to completely revamp anything. Does he seem like that, or is he kind of embracing what is already there for him?
Well, I remember he would say they're not doing a rebuild, they're doing a reload. And so it kind of sounds like they're taking what the good things that Kliff had, which was the explosive offense, and they're just reloading certain positions and trying to fill the gaps to where Kliff may have not done so well recruiting wise. And yeah, yeah, it's just that was one thing he referred to often was it's not a rebuild, it's a reload.
Yeah, when you get those coaching changes and a coach wants to come in and put their stamp on it immediately, and whether it's a catchphrase or something like that sort of tries to shift whether or not because you're not going to go into you're not going to go in somewhere and change a culture overnight, but you want to put your own stamp on it. So he's doing what you need to do when you come in as a new coach, and whether or not he has success with it remains to be seen, but I think he's going about it the right way. If you have the pieces in place to be successful in offense, and you can say, well, let me plug and play a couple of these guys here and fill some places of need. I think that's a great way to go about it, to try to get some instant success until you start to build your own recruiting classes up and get your own type of players on campus. So no, good on him for that, man. It sounds like he's definitely sort of carving his own path, and we'll see how it goes. How do you sort of, well, let me ask you this. Are there any positions, like position groups maybe of strength on this team, offense or defense, that you could sort of say without a doubt, this position group will be solid next year no matter what? And like you said, that's a big if we have a season, right?
Yeah. Honestly, the wide receiver position is probably the most solid position at Texas Tech. It's always been a strength, a huge strength for the offense. Because you'll have, if the season happens, you'll have T.J. Vasher, you have Keyshawn Carter, Dalton Rigdon. These are just some of the guys on the receiver group that can really explode. They're fast. They're strong. I would also say it's not a really solid position, but something that I'm kind of liking to see for Texas Tech is the defensive backs, the secondary. There's a few guys on there that they've added Eric Monroe, but there's also some returning guys that have showed a lot of promise, and now that they have like another year of experience, I think can really help the secondary.
That's interesting. To me, that says a lot about, to your point about what Matt Wells is trying to do. When you can mention in the preseason that the secondary at Texas Tech can be one of the strengths of the team, that's something we haven't heard for how long? I mean, where
Ever.
people were talking about like watch the secondary at Tech, like this could be a real kind of like sleeper, one of the upper position groups on the team. If that's the case, then I think he's doing a hell of a job kind of rebuilding those positions or those position groups that may have been lacking, like you said.
And I believe Douglas Coleman last year, he was correct me if I'm wrong, either the NCAA leader in interceptions or the Big 12 at least, because it was like Douglas Coleman was always around the ball. And he got drafted, I think it's by Seattle because of that too.
They know their DBs there too.
Yeah,
So if
Seattle
that says anything, man.
Well, but I mean, when you have players that you can that you can build around, and now some of these younger players have seen what it's like to be a ball hawk, and maybe they don't have those exact skills, but they've seen what it takes to be that type of a player, and that's the sort of thing that can really set off a position group and set off a side of the ball, is when you've seen how it's done, you've seen what it takes, and maybe some people can piece these skills together and others can piece these together, and you can, as a whole, you can make a position group or a side of the ball even better. So that's interesting. It's an interesting development to be able to watch for this season, I think. Yeah. Kerry, what were you going to say? I think I cut you off.
Oh, no, you were fine. I just I want to make sure we get in a little bit of basketball talk.
Yeah, let's riff,
real quick,
man.
but I just have one more question before
Okay.
we switch gears. What is your best or favorite, if you had one story to tell about either Pat Mahomes or Kliff, what's your favorite story? What's the most memorable one thing from your time on campus with those guys?
I think it was I think I forget what game it was, but I believe Alan Bowman had thrown an interception, and it was a pretty bad interception. It wasn't just like an accidental, like the receiver bopped it. He threw it right to the guy, and it was just not pretty. and Kliff had gotten on to Alan Bowman on the sideline. So the following presser, I asked Kliff what he said to Alan, and Kliff was like, I can't repeat what I said. So I was like, okay, I understand that speaks to it. So that's probably got to be one of my favorite moments with Kliff Kingsbury.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I
That's-
can't repeat that.
That's great and expected, but that's the type of questions that needs to be asked, though. Like whether or not he's gonna, a coach probably won't answer truthfully, but I think it's important to ask those types of questions, and for him to just say, well, I can't repeat what I told you. You get it. You know what happened. You get it. So that was great. Do you have anything cool? Like, did you get a ball signed by either one of those guys, or a hat or anything cool like that, or take pictures with any of them at any time? I know, like, that's sort of, you don't want to cross any boundaries as a member of the media and sort of anything like that. But did you come across anything like that from those two, or did you grab a shirt or something like that? Anything cool?
No, you really had to keep your distance
Sure.
to at least limit some of the bias. But I will say the kind of loophole that I was able to do was I met Jakeem Grant and got my hat signed by Jakeem Grant. It's kind of faded now, but yeah, he was just across the street from my apartment doing like a signing thing. So I just walked over and took a photo with him, and he signed my hat. So yeah.
There you go.
Nice.
Very cool. Well, Gary, I think, Kerry, we're gonna transition to basketball.
Yeah, I just
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I guess, also about your time on campus in Lubbock. Did you get to spend any time, chat, or anything with Chris Beard, the head basketball coach at Tech?
Lots of times, especially with my time at Red Raider Sports. The year that they went to the national championship, I asked Chris Beard lots of questions. I'm sure he was tired of me at some point, but yeah. So Chris Beard is such a cool guy. He's kind of another guy that is like Kliff, kind of welcoming for a young reporter. Except if you ask a bad question at the wrong time, he'll kind of give you a Greg Popovich kind of answer. So you have to be careful a little bit.
That's what's interesting. He seems like a pretty stand-up, good guy, and it seems like what he's done with getting Tech to the national championship in basketball, like, it's incredibly impressive. I know there's been a lot of chatter about his future in Lubbock. I know he signed the new contract. How do you see it playing out? I hear just him and his family are just as happy as can be in Lubbock, and that he doesn't really have any eyes for anywhere else. But it's college basketball, money talks, and all that kind of stuff. How do you see this thing playing out in the long term?
It's interesting because I remember having to essentially cover that whole ordeal with the contract signing, and everyone wanting to know, is he going to come back? And there were so many theories being thrown around. And really my theory is that seeing how close they got to the national championship, I think for me personally, I think Chris Beard is probably going to stay until they can probably win a national championship. I think that's what he wants for Texas Tech. I think once that happens, he might go on to different things. There was a few theories that he was going to go to the NBA. So whether that happens exactly how I theorize it is up to the basketball gods, but we shall see.
Does he seem like an NBA guy to you? To me, he doesn't. He seems like kind of, we were talking about Kliff kind of being maybe more suited for the NFL. I feel like Chris Beard's more suited for the college game. Does it seem that way to you from interacting with him?
I agree. He is definitely for the college game, but like you said, money talks, and so if he gets this huge offer, he might be like, "Well, I guess I'm going to NBA." So
yeah,
right.
You get a phone call. You get a phone call from the right franchise, like Brad Stevens got from Boston not too long ago. Although Brad Stevens' coaching style obviously translates to any level. That guy's one of the greatest coaches in the world, and you could tell that from when he was in college. But when you look at a guy like Beard and how close he got, and I believe did he just get a 4-star commit? I know there's been some big commitment stuff. I think there's been some big commitment stuff around the program lately. He's not having trouble getting people on campus, Jack. So
Yeah, I
like,
saw like a 7-1 Russian or something last night,
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
yeah,
literally big commitment. Like,
yeah, hey, like,
oh,
so with that sort of momentum and being able to recruit to Lubbock of all places, like uh, it seems like he might be able to actually be a long term. Let me rephrase this. It wasn't too long ago that if you told me that a coach was going to stay at Texas Tech basketball program to win a national championship, I mean, I think you're making a joke about it, right? But when you see this guy and the talent that he's bringing on and his ability to coach players up, like it's legitimate. Like this could really happen, Jack, couldn't it?
yeah. And something that people always bring up with Texas Tech is that they've lost these guys. They lost Tariq Owens. They've lost Zach Smith. They always bring up past players that they've lost, but it always seems like Chris Beard can kind of create a team around these guys he's bringing in that almost looks like nothing's changed except it's just different guys filling these roles. And yeah, they've added they added the 7-1 Russian, and it seems like Tech's getting more of a Russia popularity recently. They added
fascinating pipeline there from
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever
Russia to
works.
Lubbock.
they added Mac McClung from Georgetown. They added Marco Santos Silva from VCU, and they may have lost Moretti and Ramsey and Chris Clark, but and that's part of a shame because the way the coronavirus pandemic caused the season to pretty much end. That was a shame you couldn't fully see what they were capable of. But no, yeah, and they have some great freshman commits too. So Chris Beards just seems like a guy that can reload instead of having to rebuild all the time.
Yeah,
Well, and when
I
you can pick and choose, when you can get transfers in, just like we were talking about in football, when you can get those transfers in, and it just looks like the wheel never stops rolling in terms of it just looking like a well-oiled machine. That's a sign of a successful coach and a successful program, I think.
yeah, and I really appreciate coaches that build game plans and build a system around the players that they have, and they can kind of work with those pieces. Unlike a certain coach here in the Austin metro area that kind of will take top end talent and kind of try to force them into whatever system that he wants to implement. And that's where I respect Beard for doing that. And that's what was so incredible about that national title game run was like leading up to that, the transfers, the player, like these senior players, those things, to be able to do that in this kind of era of one and done players. And I think people are like, well, let's see what he can do when he starts trying to get the big recruits. Well, I think he'll be fine. I'm not concerned about
Yep.
him changing his system, or I don't know. I think he's in really good shape. I think you are lucky to have him in Lubbock.
And it always helps that Jarrett Culver and Zaire Smith were drafted in the first round. That always helps recruiting as well. If I go to Texas Tech, I might get drafted in the first round. So
Doesn't hurt. Sure doesn't hurt.
Well, we got about 5 minutes here. Jay, anything you want to get to? I know we can talk a little preview talk. I know we're talking about the kind of if we even have any of these sports seasons coming up. Anything you want to get to?
Yeah, Jack. I guess just in a couple minutes, man. How if we have a season this year, how do you see it going for Texas Tech football, and maybe even throwing a forecast of a record?
okay, really, just for me, the big one is the health of Alan Bowman. He's had some scrapes and bruises as of late, and Alan Bowman to me has the potential to be a great quarterback. Probably not as Patrick Mahomes, but just the next great quarterback for Texas Tech if he can stay healthy. And it all really depends on that. I think Matt Wells has got some experience now. He knows how the Big 12 is. He knows how rough it can be regards to how to try and defend Big 12 offenses. And for a record prediction, well, given the current trend that I think it'll be just conference play, um,
Oh
uh,
yeah, I hadn't even thought about that.
it could be I'm trying to redo the math here because it's going to be just conference. I think you could look at probably possibly like 4 and 5 if it, just conference play, 4 and 5 conference record, get a few of these wins that were close last year. They could probably turn the tide on those games like against Kansas State or something of that nature, where they were close before, they just needed a little bit of help, and they might get that from this offseason.
Yeah, it's really I had kind of the future non-conference schedule for Tech pulled up here, and for this season, UTEP, Alabama State, and Arizona. All those except for the UTEP game, which would have been in El Paso, we're planned to be in Lubbock, and I, who knows what Arizona's going to be, but I feel like that's a pretty doable schedule for Tech there, and that's what's going to make this whole thing so crazy. You talk about maybe 4 and 5 in the conference,
Yeah.
but you win those non-conference games, you're looking at potentially, a 7, maybe even 8-win team, and how does that change perception for Matt Wells with a 7 or 8-win schedule if you're able to play non-conference compared to the round robin of the Big 12, which could eat some of these teams up. So I think it's going to be a fascinating football season if we have one, but
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
if.
I think there's a lot of that's gonna be thrown out of the window, and a lot of these coaches that were maybe on the hot seat before because of the coronavirus, if there is a season, I think that they'll have an extra year to breathe. So whatever campus they're on, I think that coaches are having to deal with a lot, but I don't think many will have to worry about losing their jobs unless it's like so many, there's people that are canceling programs, man. We don't know where this is going to go financially. So, Kerry, it'll be interesting to see, man.
For sure. Well, we're kind of up against it on time here, but man, this has been great. We'll have to get you back on, Jack. This is especially if we do have a season, whether it's basketball, football, even some college baseball talk. I know we can go in there too. Tech's been pretty successful on that front as well. So yeah, man, it's great having you on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jack,
right.
Thanks a lot for coming on, man. We appreciate it. This is great. Great job, man. Thanks a lot. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll catch you on the flip side.
Thanks, everybody.
ATX representing. Fatal, baby.
All in 06 on a Saturday. Can the drip and swing down, let me